Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks. Drones over Poland, drones over the Baltics, in Denmark and the Netherlands, only to name a few. Is Moscow testing NATO's readiness to respond to aerial threats, or is it preparing an attack on Western military and civilian infrastructure? To talk about it, we're joined by Mark Toth, US National Security and Foreign Policy Analyst. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Maciej. Good to see you. Thank you.
To see you too. So, what is Russia doing with the drones over military and civilian airports in Europe? And can we be absolutely sure it is in fact Russia and no one else?
Yeah, Maciej, I think for those of us that have been arguing there's been a gathering storm that's going to hit Eastern Europe and the Baltic states soon, we can now safely say that that storm is here. And we're seeing that in evidence in terms of the drones that hit Poland on September 9th and 10th, 19 or so of those, with, according to Zelensky, by the way, just today, that there could have been a total of 90 that made their way, had Ukraine not interdicted some 70-odd of those before they hit Poland's skies. And then just a few days after that, excuse me, what we saw in Romania with drone overflights as well. And then ultimately the things that were occurring in Estonia, where you had the overflight of 3 Russian MiG-31s for 12 minutes, carrying, we believe, Kinzhal missiles, which are capable of carrying nukes. And so you add that to what we still can't yet confirm, these hybrid attacks that appear to be these kind of cyber attacks on European civilian airports and the like, what we've seen over Denmark and elsewhere. This storm is here, and NATO needs to be taking it seriously. And it's a good thing, I might add, that military committee of NATO was meeting in Riga and Latvia just the last couple of days. I'm sure all of this was high on that topic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely so. But I'm wondering, because so far Russia tried to paralyze the civilian infrastructure in Europe by using hacking, internet hacking methods. Now, I'm wondering whether Russia could be in fact preparing plans for future aerial attacks on Europe's infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely, Maciej. It's a dual-purpose thing. I mean, one, they are trying to disrupt. Part of this is messaging to Europe. Stand down in Ukraine. Do not provide more assistance. Do not do any kind of Western Ukraine sky shield to interject Russian drones, etc. They want that messaging to get across. Fortunately, it's not working. Europe rightly is saying, look, we're not going to tolerate this. Europe to date has implemented through NATO the Eastern Shield. The talks continue about how better to create a drone wall. That was just announced by the EU Defense Commissioner yesterday and today, depending upon where you are in the world. And so all of those things are good. The second side of it is testing, right? When you conduct these kind of operations, whether they're cyber, taking down of systems, et cetera, that guide and airplanes and the like, or jam the GPS systems that guide them in the air, all of those things serve a purpose. You learn lessons, you gather data, and you learn how to implement that if this turns more kinetic in the future. So it's really a little bit of two things. It's messaging, but it's also preparing for a future conflict if it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the Shahed drones attack on Poland. Now, despite drones over civilian and military sites in Denmark, its foreign minister, Rasmussen, has stated that the country will not invoke NATO's Article 4. Now, is the situation in Denmark so much different from the one that occurred in Poland with the Shaheds?
Yeah, I think, Maciej, we just need to learn more information at this point. It's not yet clear to me, based on the reporting that I've seen, that we know exactly what these drones were. I mean, we do have numerous instances of private citizens using drones near airports and causing problems and havoc with air travel. We've seen that repeatedly in the U.S. We've seen it in Europe as well. Until we get more definitive explanations of exactly what these drones were, what their origins, where they were made, et cetera, all those things that I'm sure that the intelligence services of NATO and the individual European countries are trying to do, then we may be back in NATO.
But the thing here is that Denmark has already declared, it is sure, it was a state actor that disrupted, the military facilities in Denmark.
Then, Machi, my apologies. I missed that. I did not see that confirmation in preparing to come on today. Absolutely. Then this is still Article 4 territory, and it's disappointing that, in my regard, reacting to this, that Denmark has not enacted Article 4. Because look, if there's just more instances of Russia expanding, whether it's them or it's China or a combination thereof, whoever the state actor that is behind what's going on in Denmark, NATO needs to be responding, and they need to be responding sternly and swiftly, and these things need to be shot down. They should not be allowed to fly freely and uninterdicted.
Mm-hmm. Now, Latvia, but also many other countries of NATO's eastern flank would very much welcome a drone wall. Now, what would this drone wall look like?
Yeah, I think in the most simplistic terms, the drone war, at its most basic level, has got to involve sensors. You've got to detect these things long before they're getting into. And NATO has that capability already in terms of what their satellite capabilities are that are provided by the U.S. and so forth. But they also need the ability to track these at low level, ground level, and that's going to require a different kind of sensor area. They need defense systems, right? These are different kinds of things to shoot down. You don't want F-16s using expensive missiles to be the ones that are always interdicting these things, or F-35s is another platform that could do it from the air. You need something more along the lines of what we've seen in Israel with their Iron Dome and the different layers they have, that David Sling, et cetera, dependent upon whether it's a drone, a ballistic missile, or what have you. Those are the kind of things that you need as well. And then you need a lot more jamming capabilities that are probably spread out in terms of, say, if these drones get through and if they're heading towards targets that are deeper within Europe and in Eastern Europe and Western Europe, then you need to be able to jam them to make sure that they miss their targets. So, that's the early inception of what needs to be happening. But Europe is a long way from doing that. I mean, if you look at the time frame that Israel took to create its multi-layered defense system, that was years in the making, and Europe has to catch up and catch up fast.
Maybe that was the thing that NATO commanders were debating over in Riga, in Latvia. Now, what is the symbolic aspect of this meeting in Riga, given that the US considers withdrawing its forces from the region?
Yeah, I think at this point, we need to wait on that. I mean, the U.S. has talked about withdrawing training and the like, at least the funding for it. I'm still not seeing definitive reporting yet out of the Pentagon that they're going to withdraw troops from there. Now, that may happen. The reason I bring that up, though, is just a few weeks ago, you might recollect, President Trump was telling your President Naraki that he thought that if Poland wanted more troops, he'd be willing to station that. So you kind of have conflicting messages there. I think this time, though, this meeting, the military committee of NATO that was meeting in Riga, is more than symbolic at this point. I think it does have an additional practical level to it at this point. I mean, clearly, there's been numerous increases of Russian threats that are happening throughout the Baltic states and the Baltic, over the Baltic Sea itself, et cetera, is extending now, as you just reported, and I missed, obviously, into Denmark itself. Now this becomes real, and they need to be reacting to that. So I suspect a lot of the things that were talked about at that meeting were very practical, going over how, the rules of engagement, what are NATO pilots going to be authorized to do, under what circumstances, not only do they interdict drones, but where. Over Belarus, maybe, over Ukraine. Those things need to be decided, as well as whether or not they actually shoot down Russian fighters if they make an incursion again into NATO airspace. So those are going to be key things. I think also what you're likely to be seeing in these meetings is basically NATO re-looking at all the things it needs to do to defend itself if there is eventually a Russian or Belarusian incursion into Eastern Europe via the Baltic states. That means re-looking at the Suwalki Gap, looking at how that defense is aligned, making sure that NATO is prepared for that, and then on a short-term basis, making sure that the training is adequate to that task. If that's what these commanders believe, they need to be most prepared to do. If there's a near-term Russian aggression in a year, 2, 3, 4 years out. But I think it had real practical terms this time. This was more than just a symbolic meeting that typically happens twice a year. I think they had real things to discuss about, and those things were very, very serious this time.
Now, what do you think is the Russian approach to these European declarations of downing any Russian aircraft that enters NATO airspace? Do you think they are really taking it seriously?
At this point, it's a fair question. I think they do. I think they learned the lesson. Look, you've already had an instance of a NATO country in 2015, that being Turkey, that shot down a Russian airplane that only encroached for 12 seconds. We're not talking the 12 minutes that happened with the 3 MiGs over Estonia. We're talking 12 seconds, and they shot it down. So they know NATO's willing to act to defend its airspace. Of course, Russian state media, they're going to spin it, and they're going to bluff. Medvedev, the former prime minister and former president of Russia, certainly has been bellicose, as has Lavrov in statements that he's made, the foreign minister of Russia. But the reality is that privately, it's been made clear that NATO says we're going to shoot these things down if they come back. So Russia certainly has to take it seriously. Now, that doesn't mean they won't try. Just a couple of days ago, they were testing Alaskan airspace yet again, and the U.S. Air Force NORAD had to respond and interdict those planes trying to get close to Alaskan airspace here in the United States. So they may try, and we may be in dangerous territory here because accidents do happen. And if Russia finds its planes wavering, having an incursion too far into, NATO airspace, they may indeed get shot down. But I think they do take it seriously. And if they don't, they should be taking it seriously.
Now, Russians have been quite often compared to chess players that plan their moves, a few steps ahead. Now, all in all, in the end, it seems that NATO becomes more and more resolved to protect its skies from any Russian aerial incursions. Now, is this the effect Moscow really wants to obtain? What is Moscow's long-term goal here?
Right. There are multiple things. One, what you talked about earlier, is Moscow's getting ready. If down the line there has to be a conflict with NATO, they want to learn things, they want to intimidate, they want to try to test the battlefield and see how that plays out, especially in this new modern era of drone warfare, which Europe doesn't yet have an effective defense against. But there are other things going on, something that my colleague, Colonel John Sweet, and I wrote about in The Hill. Some of this is that because of how poorly Putin's war is going in Ukraine, he needs to create some kind of provocation in NATO to try to buy himself time there to distract from that. And so some of what we're seeing here, Machi, and it was an excellent question for you to raise, is this kind of distraction trying to happen? He wants to provoke some kind of incident in a NATO country, most likely, and he's doing that through hybrid means, through cyber attacks, through sabotage, through assassinations, and now they're doing it kinetically with drones and with Russian aircraft. He needs something to try to distract NATO from making sure that they don't continue to support Ukraine. So in response, NATO has to be saying, look, we're going to do all of the above. We're not only going to continue to defend our own airspace, but we're only going to double down and do more to make sure that this war in Ukraine is won and that Putin's forces are expelled completely. So it's an important point that you're making, and one that we all need to be paying close attention to going forward.
Mark Toth, the U.S. National Security and Foreign Policy Analyst, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Machi. Good evening to you and your viewers.
Thank you. And thank you, our viewers, for watching and stay with us for so much more here on TVP World.